Hello and welcome to the Maths Guide. Now today we're going to be talking about margin, but the last day we were talking about markup, and it's important to have a quick look at this again before we talk about margin. Markup is the profit that you make, but it's as a percentage of the cost price. So if we want to find the selling price, we know that the initial cost of the cost of the coat, plus the markup will give us the selling price, but just remember it's a percentage of the cost price. Now, when I'm talking about percentages, I always say percentage doesn't really mean anything by itself. It's always a percentage of something, and I keep laboring that point. So let's have a look at an example why we want to talk about what we're finding a percentage of. Given the question, the price of a coat is €20, which is increased by 20% and then decreased by 20%. What's the new price? What does this mean? Well, in step one, we're told the price of a coat. In step two, we know the price is increased by 20%, but this is 20% of €20, which is €4, to give us €24. In step three, the price is decreased by 20%, but this is 20% of a different number. It's a fraction of a different number, so it's not €4 anymore that we're subtracting. It's going to be €4.80 in this case if you work it out. So remember, when we increase or decrease or find markup or margin, we want to know what percentage of what we're trying to find the percentage of. So as you can see from this question, it's important to keep thinking what you're finding a percentage of. In step two, it was a percentage of 20. In step three, it was a percentage of 24. So you can't just think it goes up by 20 and down by 20 and go back to the same place. It's a fraction of a different number to get a different answer. So let's have a look at margin. Paul sells a coat for €250 with a margin of 20%. So what is margin? Margin is the profit that the salesman makes, similar to markup, but this time it's as a percentage of the selling price. So whenever you're talking about margin, you're talking about a percentage of the selling price. So the profit that Paul's make is 20% of the selling price, which is €250, which, as you know, is €50. Let's have a look at trying to find out the cost of the coat for Paul. He sells a coat for €250 with a margin of 20%. Again, margin is the profit that the salesman makes as a percentage of the selling price. So it's 20% of the selling price, which is €50, which we just worked out. So what is the cost? Well, the cost price of the coat is what you sell it for, less the profit that you make. So it's €250, less the profit, €50, which is €200. Now, in this question, we worked out the profit that you made and then we subtracted it. In previous questions, you might have worked out the profit that you made and added, but we want a more direct method. I don't want to be working out numbers and then adding them, subtracting them, because sometimes you get weird answers with that. Let's have a look at a more direct method using percentages and using the unitary method to find out what we want. Paul sells a coat for €250 with a margin of 20%. That's 20% of the selling price. If we're talking about margin, we're talking about a percentage of the selling price. So in this table, the selling price, of course, is 100% of the selling price. The margin is 20% of the selling price. So the cost is going to be the selling price, 100% of the selling price, less 20% of the selling price, which is 80% of the selling price. Now I'm laboring the point here a little bit, but just remember with margin, we're talking about a percentage of the selling price. So in this question, maybe we want to find out what the cost of the coat is. We know that 100% of the selling price is €250. The cost is the selling less the profit, which, as we saw on the last one, is 80% of the selling price. So we want to find 80% of the selling price when we know 100% of the selling price. And as you've practiced in previous questions, we do this using the unitary method. The unitary method means if we know 100% of something or any percentage of something, first we find 1%, and then once we've found 1%, it's very easy to find the percentage that we want. So we had 100%, which was 250. We find 1% by dividing by 100, and then we can find 80% of the selling price, which is €200. So exactly the same answer that we got the last time, but a direct method of moving from one percentage to another using the unitary method. Margin. Paul buys a coat for €40 and sells it with a margin of 20%. What is the sales price? Again, we're talking about margin, so we're talking about percentages of the selling price. If we're told the cost of the coat, the €40, we need to write down what the cost of the coat is as a percentage of the selling price. So from the last example, we can see that we're finding 80% of the selling price is €40. We're given 80% of the selling price. We want to find 100% of the selling price. So we use the unitary method to go from 80% of the selling price to 100% of the selling price. So in this example, you go from €40 down to half €1 and back up to €50. Paul buys a coat for €40 and sells it with a margin of 20%. What is the selling price? So this is exactly the same question, but just laid out on a table. We have the cost, and we have the margin, and we have the selling price. Now we know that the selling price is the cost plus the margin, so we can work out that the cost is the selling price less the margin. Again, when we're talking about margin, we're talking about a percentage of the selling price. So the selling price is 100% of the selling price, the margin is 20% of the selling price, so the cost is 80% of the selling price. We were given the €40, which we know is 80% of the selling price. We wanted to find 100% of the selling price, and we did that using the unitary method. We could also easily find the margin, the profit that he makes, by the unitary method, except finding 20%. Okay, that's a little bit long-winded. Just remember, when we're talking about margin, we're talking about a percentage of the selling price. And I'd like you to practice these questions using the unitary method, remembering this table, that the selling price is 100% of the selling price. If you have the cost, it's going to be whatever percentage subtracted. And if you want to find the margin, it's going to be whatever percentage of the selling price again. So just remember that, have a go at the questions, and the best of luck. So let's have a look at a number of examples. John sells a bike with a margin of 18% for €236. What was the cost price of the bike using the unitary method? Okay, so we're talking about margin, so we're going to be talking about percentages of the selling price. So the cost price of the bike is going to be the selling price less the margin. So that's 100% of the selling price less 18% of the selling price is 82% of the selling price. So we know the sales price is €236 and we want to find 82% of the selling price. Well, to do that, we use the unitary method. We know 100% of the selling price is €236 and we want to find 82%. So the first thing we do is we find 1% of the selling price, which is €2.36, and then we find 82% of the selling price by multiplying by 82, and we get €193.52. So we're talking about margin, it's a percentage of the selling price, and to find the cost price, we're going to be saying the selling price less the profit. Let's have a look at another example. Mary sells a coat with a margin of 40%. She makes a profit of €90. What was the cost price of the coat? Okay, so we're talking about margin, we're talking about percentage of the selling price. So we know she makes a profit of €90. We know the profit is the margin. So we know that the margin, 40% of the selling price. So we say 40% of the selling price is €90. We want to find the cost. And again, that's going to be the selling price, 100% of the selling price, less the margin, 40% of the selling price is 60% of the selling price. This might seem a little complicated, but if you work it through your mind, you'll get better at this on exactly what you're doing. So we want to find 60% of the selling price. We know 40% of the selling price is that €90. To find 60%, we use the unitary method. So we find 1% of the selling price. We divide 90 by 40 to get €2.25. And we multiply that by 60 to get €135. And if we wanted to find the sales price, we could do that directly as well. Okay, so just remember, when you're talking about margin, we're talking about a percentage of the selling price. Start with what you know. In this question, we know that 40% of the selling price is €90, and try and find out what you're trying to find out. So the cost price is what we want. So that's going to be 60% of the selling price. So keep in mind, when you're talking about margin, you're talking about percentage of the selling price. Then you use the unitary method to go from what you know, the 40%, to what you want, which is the 60%, via finding 1% of the selling price. Have a go at these questions, and the best of luck.